Chair, first of all, I would like to express how moved I am and how privileged I feel to speak to you today. I am a rapporteur for the French law that was adopted in springtime this year, and I think that I'm extraordinarily lucky to be able to speak to you this autumn before this working group of the United Nations. Perhaps we have never been so aware all around the world that our globe, our planet, is a shared house, and that human dignity is, at the end of the day, what links us together. We have never been so aware of how fragile life is and how much beyond private forces to have a public force which regulates this, which protects it. And this can only happen through moral values and a sense of ethics. The question that we must ask ourselves today, now and throughout this week, is whether for us ethics is just a flag at the top of the ship's mast, or whether it's the figurehead leading the ship forwards. We have all come here today with our strengths and our weaknesses, with our mandate, but also with our own freedom. And it is perhaps within this freedom that our consciences inhabit. And I'd like to address this first. We have a wealth of experiences. I come from France, and I was greatly shaped by a person who created an organization to help the poorest. He said that the life of a young worker is worth more than all the gold in the world. I also remember a supporter of the French Revolution who fought slavery. And he brought together all of the principles of social and environmental responsibility and linked this to the supply chain, because he said that being complicit in the shameful traffic of slavery, not only the ships, but those who had, all the way down to those who had made the ropes or the fabric for the sails, were involved. And he said that we should all assume the moral responsibility which ended up with, in France as in other countries, us abolishing slavery. Lastly, I would like to cite an MP who was also a worker, who at the start of industrialization in France said that labor accidents should recognize the responsibility of the company when somebody's arm was torn off or somebody was hurt. It was said that this would be the end of the world, but in fact it was the dawn of a new era. Labor insurance companies were then created in order to provide remedy to victims. Then an extraordinary leap was made, which meant that work accidents were reduced by 90%. The time of prevention of labour accidents had come. The same went for mines and other areas in Europe in the 19th century. And this should now inspire work for factories all around the world. And I think we can use the French law as an inspiration, because it's a framework that has allowed us to go into this in greater detail. We need dialogue with civil society and politics. We need dialogue with United trade unions, with civil society. We need circles of intellectuals, legal advisors, philosophers. They also supported this cause. But also we need businesses. French businesses and European businesses understood the impasse of social and environmental dumping, and they want to join the new world. It is also a political fight which has never backed itself into one single ideology. We have to leave modern slavery behind us. This fight has brought together humanists of all colours. Last year we addressed the French President. 25% of MPs called on him to provide strong support for the current negotiations within the UN. These came from across the political spectrum. What principles then were set out in this French law? I would like to give you the 5 principles. The first is to use the principles of the United Nations. We haven't invented human rights. We were inspired by and we have implemented the guiding principles of the United Nations and the OECD of John Ruggie, which have a 360-degree view on human rights respect, corruption, labour and so on. We wanted to follow the same vein and take John Ruggie's recommendations seriously. Secondly, our law is a law with means. It's not an obligation to achieve results, it's a process-based law. Each company has to put in place a due diligence plan and implement it itself, the aim being to prevent risk that it evaluates and which it only is able to foresee. Then the third point, the French law is not a standards-based law. It doesn't look at individual countries, it looks at manufacturing chains in order to have a big society liability point of view. This means that you can put in effective, specific actions in order to avoid problems for human rights and the environment. It's not a standards-based law. It places trust in the ingenuity of companies in order to implement principles of responsibility. Fourthly, the success of the French law, which succeeded despite opposition from some sections of government and some companies, is that this is part of a progressive outlook. We're not going to achieve this from one day to another. We have simply started a process. We targeted the biggest companies because the most powerful and the biggest have to lead by example. That's a universal principle. I would also like to add, given the debate that I heard earlier, the principles of the French law apply both nationally and internationally, and that's why I struggled to understand the debate earlier, because these principles apply just around the corner, as they do on the other side of the world, and I can't conceive of it being any other way. The French law is progressive, and that's why it doesn't seek to regulate all subjects in one fell swoop. It regulates 80 or 90% of topics that concern us today. As such, it only regulates subsidiaries that have a clear relationship with the parent company. So it does represent a certain mass. It's not ephemeral, it's not every now and then, it's not small volumes, it's a contractual relationship over time.
Dans le droit français.
And the rules for subsidiaries are well set out in French law and other parts of the Constitution, since it defines political economic domination of those subsidiaries. The fifth point, this might be of interest to you. We're not creating a supranational jurisdiction. We're relying on a commitment for each nation to implement a law with obligations for corporations, whether they be based in the home country or elsewhere. It's on the basis of the nation, of the state, that that obligation is created to have an effect to the very ends of the world, other end of the world. It's a matter. It's like what some might moving from solitary to solidarity sovereignty. In other words, taking into account the needs and concerns of others elsewhere. I want to stress this very much today. The debates, in these debates, we're often tempted to give up, or if we can't reach the ideal overnight. I would advocate for a systemic evolution, and I want to hear it stated very clearly. It seems to me that an obligation for a result is going to lead to stalemate, but let's not be hypocritical. I would therefore call for a compromise that doesn't create an ultimate ideal, but begins, which takes a small step. But if that small step is taken at universal level, then I can assure you all that it will establish at ethic level a symmetry between rights and duties. Today we have an asymmetry. We have substantial disorder in our economies when it comes to rights, when it comes to economic power, we have limits at national level. We need to reinvent a new system that's applicable at global level. The French struggle is not a struggle against companies or against globalization. It seeks solely for that globalization to move into a new age. It's a matter here of building a new age of globalization, one that's more respectful, one more centered around the human being. I also want to say that it isn't aimed against companies and their dynamics, which do bring solutions, which do bring prosperity here and there. It sets a limit on them, and that limit today is vital. I like the comparison between the difference between a river and a swamp. What makes a river different from a swamp? What makes it different are the estuaries. We need to bring estuaries, we need to bring channels to the limits, and river and banks to the activities of companies. Those limits are loyalty, a minimum commitment to avoid the worst. So I advocate for I call for a UN treaty that should be minimalist, but which at the same time that minimum should have direct impact on the application that it will have in each and every nation. Dear friends, we cannot address the challenges of the 21st century, the demographic challenges, the challenges of the energy transitions, the challenges of the digital revolution with instruments of the Middle Age and middle-aged archaic practices. No, what we must have the courage today, whatever our origins, whatever our convictions, to come together to say that this anomaly of the current law, that we've struggled and that we've sought to bring justice to our decisions, so that we can take these messages down to our children. And how else can we explain otherwise we have to explain our passivity in this world. So we need to move the goalposts when it comes to the relationship between companies and public sector. And I want to say to the global community, let's not be afraid. Let's bring about this new order with confidence. It's a matter of leaving the old world and building a more humane world. It's within our reach, and this week it's a matter of choosing to put ethics as our signpost, as our guiding principle in our work. I thank you.